Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're diving into, well, probably the most awkward part of the working world, workplace discipline, and sometimes dismissal. Yeah, it's high-stakes stuff, whether you're the one having the tough conversation or maybe trying to figure out where you stand. We've got a whole stack of sources here looking at the rules, the cultural angles, and honestly, some of the really weird ways we talk about it in English. You know, all those phrases instead of just saying, you're fired. So our mission today, basically a shortcut. We want to help you understand how companies handle consequences around the world, what the actual rules are, and maybe why the language gets so, well, slippery.
And I think the best place to start is with the global baseline, what most places aim for, progressive discipline.
Right, this is that structured step-by-step thing that you find in, well, most developed countries, right?
Exactly. And the core idea is that it's supposed to be about correction. The main goal isn't punishment. It's trying to fix the behavior.
You have to try and guide the employee back on track before you think about ending things.
That's the key difference. It's about improvement. So the process usually follows a kind of escalation, like a ladder.
Okay.
You'd start small, maybe a verbal warning. Then, if things don't improve, you move to a formal written warning.
And after that, often comes the PIP, the Performance Improvement Plan.
Yes, the PIP. And let's be honest, this is often where employees start feeling really nervous.
I can imagine.
hmm
Because officially, it's a chance to improve, right? Structured goals, timeline.
So officially, yes, it's defined as this structured opportunity. But in practice, a lot of employees see it as the last step before the door. Or maybe cynically, just the company building its paperwork trail.
Documenting everything to justify termination later.
It ensures they can show, look, we offered support, we set goals, it didn't work out. And then you get to the more serious steps, suspension, maybe a demotion, and then the final step, termination.
Okay, but here's the twist, right? Because that whole progressive ladder, well, it's pretty common globally. That's a huge exception, the American one. Employment at will.
It's a massive difference. If you're working in, say, Germany or France or the UK, your employer generally needs a solid reason to let you go. They need just cause or a fair reason.
But not in the U.S.
Not in most cases, no. Under at will, an employer can terminate an employee for pretty much any reason, or even no reason at all, as long as it's not breaking specific laws like anti-discrimination laws.
Even for a reason that just seems unfair.
Yes, potentially. It sounds harsh, but that's the doctrine.
Why? Why does the U.S. hold on to this model when so many other similar economies don't?
Well, it traces back to old common law traditions, but a big part of it now is, frankly, business strategy, flexibility.
Speed.
Speed, exactly. It lets companies resize, restructure, change staff much faster than in countries where you have these lengthy, documentation-heavy dismissal processes.
Which must make things really complicated for big multinational companies, deciding where to hire based on these rules.
Oh, absolutely. It's a major strategic consideration.
Okay, so the legal side varies a lot. But practically, how do you know when you even need that ladder? Is there a line? What makes something just a warning versus immediate dismissal?
That's the crucial distinction, isn't it? It comes down to the difference between what we call ordinary misconduct and gross misconduct. Every manager needs to understand this line.
Okay, let's take ordinary misconduct first. What falls under that? The correctable stuff.
Exactly. This is where progressive discipline is pretty much mandatory. We're talking about things like being late or absent a few times too many, but not constantly. Minor policy stuff, maybe messing up time logs, small dress code slip-ups, maybe not following instructions perfectly, but not outright defiance.
So the trust is still there, basically. The relationship isn't totally broken, but the behavior needs a nudge, a formal warning.
Precisely. But then you have gross misconduct.
That sounds like the express lane to the exit.
It often is. This is something so serious it shatters that fundamental trust needed in an employment relationship. Right there, instantly.
And that justifies firing someone on the spot.
It justifies dismissal without needing prior warnings, yes. Though, procedural fairness is still key. We're talking about major offenses.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Theft, obviously. Fraud. Any kind of violence or threats. Serious insubordination. Harassment, discrimination. Leaking confidential company secrets. Or Showing up clearly under the influence of alcohol or drugs, especially in safety-critical roles.
These are the sackable offenses you hear about.
That's the term, yeah.
But even when you say instant dismissal, it's not literally like you're fired, get out in 5 seconds.
hmm
There's still a process.
Oh, definitely. Due process is vital. Even for gross misconduct, there usually needs to be a proper investigation, maybe a hearing where the employee can respond to the allegations. You need that fairness before the final decision.
That seems to be a bedrock principle everywhere, even if the outcome feels like a foregone conclusion.
Absolutely. Fairness in procedure is almost universal.
Okay, so we know what might lead to discipline or dismissal. Now, how do we talk about it? Because this is where English just seems to explode with options. Formal terms, euphemisms, really blunt slang. Why so many ways to say fired?
It's fascinating, isn't it? The sources suggest it's deeply tied to, well, cultural awkwardness, avoiding confrontation, trying to save face maybe for the company more than the employee sometimes.
Right, so management uses these very formal, roundabout phrases,
Exactly. To make it sound less personal, less like an attack, it distances the action from, malice or individual fault.
like being relieved of one's duties. Sounds almost gentle.
Or you're pursuing other opportunities.
My personal favorite. You're transitioning out of the role. It sounds like you're just moving furniture.
Huh. Yes. They all focus on the separation itself, not the reason for it. And internationally, especially in the UK, Australia, places like that, you hear made redundant a lot.
Which is different, right? That's a layoff.
Crucially different. Redundancy means the job itself is disappearing. The work isn't needed anymore. It's not about your performance. Being fired is about you. Redundancy is about the role.
Okay, so that's the corporate speak. But then you have the other side, the informal, sometimes pretty aggressive slang that people actually use.
Oh, yeah. That language is much more direct, often reflecting the shock or anger. You get canned,
Sacked.
given the heave-ho. They're
Yep.
colorful, and there's no mistaking the meaning.
The one I always remember is getting the pink slip. It sounds almost quaint now, but there's a real history there, isn't there?
There is. It dates back to, the earlier mid-20th century in the U.S.? Apparently, some companies literally used pink paper for the formal termination notice.
No way, really?
Yeah, so getting that piece of pink paper became the symbol, the tangible proof you were out. No ambiguity there.
Wow. Okay, so that's the language of termination. But what about before it gets to that point? The warnings, the discipline itself. English has idioms for that too, right?
Yeah.
Strong ones.
Absolutely. We use some really vivid phrases to make it clear things are serious. Like, if a manager has to read someone the riot act,
That sounds intense. It's not just a casual chat.
not at all. It comes from an old British law, the Riot Act of 1714. An official had to literally read this formal proclamation to a crowd before using force to break them up.
So using it at work means there's a final formal warning. Listen up or else.
Pretty much, it signals a very severe reprimand. Then you've got those classic metaphors for being in trouble, like being on thin ice.
Yeah, everyone knows that one. You're in a dangerous spot.
One wrong move and you fall through. Or a manager might draw a line in the sand.
Setting a clear boundary. Cross this and that's it.
Exactly. These idioms aren't subtle. They're meant to grab attention and signal that corrective action is needed urgently.
Okay, so we have the legal frameworks, like progressive discipline versus at will. We have all this language from HR speak to slang. But you mentioned culture earlier. That must play a huge role in how this stuff is actually handled, right? Not just the words, but the delivery.
Oh, massively. The legal structure is one thing, but culture really dictates the how. And this brings us to that key idea of high context versus low context cultures.
Explain that. High context is.
Think places like Japan, China, many Asian and Latin American cultures. Communication relies heavily on shared understanding, nonverbal cues, the relationship itself. Preserving harmony and letting people save face is paramount. Direct confrontation is avoided.
So let's say you have an employee in Japan who's always late. A manager can't just call them in and give them a formal written warning like they might in, say, Germany.
Probably not, no. That would likely cause public embarrassment, shame the employee, and disrupt the team's harmony, which is highly valued.
So what would they do?
They might approach it indirectly, maybe express concern. Is everything all right at home? The team really relies on you being here to start our morning meeting on time.
Ah, so the message is delivered. Your lateness impacts the team, but it's wrapped in concern for the person and their duty to the group. The employee gets a warning, but face is saved.
Exactly. And if it did come to dismissal, it might not even be called a firing. They might be subtly managed out. Maybe their responsibilities dwindle. Maybe they're offered a decent severance to resign voluntarily.
Okay, so that's high context. What about low context cultures?
Think Germany, the US, Scandinavia, the UK to some extent. Here, communication is expected to be explicit, direct, written down. It relies on facts, rules, policies. Clarity and transparency are the priorities.
So that warning for poor work quality in Germany we talked about.
Right. It wouldn't be a gentle, face-saving chat. It would likely be a formal written letter, very direct. It would probably cite the specific parts of the employment contract, list the performance metrics that weren't met, state the legal basis for the warning.
Wow. Very procedural. No ambiguity, but maybe less comfortable.
Perhaps. The focus is squarely on the policy violation, the facts. It's designed to be clear, documented, and legally robust.
It really shows, doesn't it? The same problem. Poor performance, lateness handled in such dramatically different ways. One focusing on harmony and face, the other on rules and facts.
And as a manager, especially in a global company, you absolutely have to understand this difference. It changes everything about how you communicate.
Whether you use an idiom, a euphemism, or cite a paragraph from the employee handbook.
Precisely.
Okay, this brings us to the practical side for managers trying to navigate this minefield. Let's tackle that common myth you hear. The idea that you always get 3 warnings before you can be fired. True or false?
Mostly false. It's a very persistent myth. But in most legal systems, there's no actual law that mandates exactly 3 warnings, like 1 verbal, 1 written, 1 final written.
So where did the idea come from then?
It comes from that principle of progressive discipline we started with. For ordinary misconduct, especially if it's repeated, escalating through steps like verbal, then written, then maybe a final written warning is considered good practice. It shows fairness.
But not for everything.
Definitely not. Remember gross misconduct. Things like theft, violence, serious breaches.
Right, the trust breakers.
Exactly. For those, you generally can move straight to dismissal, even if it's the very first offense. No 3 warnings needed because the act itself is seen as fundamentally severing the employment relationship.
So what's the #1 rule for managers trying to handle discipline fairly and legally given all this variation?
Consistency. Above all else, be consistent. Disciplinary actions should be seen as corrective measures, trying to fix behavior, not as personal punishment.
Meaning, if one person gets a written warning for being late 5 times,
Then the next person who's late 5 times should also get a written warning. Unless there are clear, objective reasons for treating them differently, maybe one has 20 years of perfect service and the other started last month and has already been warned verbally.
and you need to document those reasons.
Absolutely. Document everything. That consistency and the objective justification for any deviation is your best defense against claims of unfairness or discrimination. It can't look like it's based on whether you like the employee or not.
You mentioned something interesting earlier, too, about the practical difference between verbal and written warnings.
Yes, there's a behavioral insight there from some sources. Often, a verbal warning is only considered active or valid for maybe 3 months. A written warning, however, might stay active for 6 months, sometimes longer.
And the thinking is,
The thinking is that it's harder for someone to just pretend to change their behavior, to fake it for 6 months compared to 3. So the written warning, with its longer validity period, is often seen as a more effective tool for achieving real, sustained behavioral change.
makes sense. It forces a longer period of accountability.
Right.
Okay, this has been a really helpful deep dive. We've seen how the basic rules, progressive discipline versus employment at will, set the stage globally. We've seen how culture dramatically shifts the delivery, high context versus low context. And we've unpacked all that English language from the very formal HR speak, like transitioning out of the role, all the way down to the blunt slang, like getting the pink slip.
It really highlights how complex this whole area is.
It does. And it leaves us with a tricky question, especially for you listening, maybe if you work in a global company. Given these huge differences in laws and culture about what's fair, how can a global company possibly standardize discipline?
Yeah, that's the challenge. Take something like working under the influence of alcohol. Should that always be instant dismissal everywhere?
Yeah, the risk is totally different, right? If it's, say, an office cleaner working alone after hours versus a surgeon about to operate.
Exactly. The impact, the risk level, changes dramatically depending on the role. So how much flexibility can you build into a global rulebook? How do you balance the need for worldwide consistency with the need for context-specific judgments about severity and risk?
Something to think about. How do you create rules that are both globally consistent and locally fair?